Sarah Thompson sat on the edge of her bed, the fabric of the worn quilt rough against her fingertips. The small bedroom was a cacophony of colors, toys strewn across the floor, and the faint sound of laughter and shouts drifting in from the next room. Her three children, full of life and innocence, were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside their door. Clutching a crumpled eviction notice in her hands, Sarah felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. The notice was a stark reminder of her reality, a reality that had shifted so dramatically in the past few months. "Mom, look, we're making a fort," her youngest Lily squealed with delight, her voice breaking through the fog of Sarah's thoughts. The sight of her children, their faces lit with joy, was a bittersweet moment. It filled her with warmth, but also with a deep-seated fear of what lay ahead. How could she provide for them when the walls of their home were closing in around her? "Looks amazing, sweetie," Sarah called out, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She tried to focus on the sound of their laughter, the innocence of childhood, but the eviction notice tugged at her, a constant reminder of the impending doom that loomed over them. Just as she was about to stand, the front door slammed open with a force that rattled the frames in their home. Mark, her husband, stormed in, his face twisted in anger. "This is ridiculous, Sarah," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "I can't believe you're putting this on me." Sarah's heart sank. "Mark, I'm not putting anything on you. I'm just trying to understand how we got here." She stood up, the eviction notice slipping from her fingers and landing on the floor, forgotten for the moment. "We can fix this together if we just—" "Fix this together?" he interrupted, pacing the small living room. "You think I want to stay here? You think I want to be in this dump? I'm doing the best I can, but you just keep nagging me about money and bills. It's suffocating. Don't you dare blame me for this." Sarah's voice rose, her frustration boiling over. "You made those choices, Mark. You took out loans and now we're paying for it. I'm just trying to keep our family together." "Family?" He let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "You think this is what family is? Living in constant fear? I can't take it anymore." He turned and stormed back towards the door, his back rigid with indignation. "Where are you going?" Sarah called after him, her heart racing. "Somewhere far away from here," he shot back, his voice filled with bitterness. "You want to be a single mother? Fine. Maybe you'll see how easy it is without me." The door slammed shut behind him, reverberating through the small house like an ominous bell, tolling for a lost cause. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Anger and hurt coursed through her veins, mingling with the fear that had been her constant companion for so long. She felt betrayed, alone, and utterly defeated. How could he walk out on her when they had three children depending on them? "Mom, what's wrong?" her eldest son Jacob asked, his voice laced with concern as he peeked around the corner. His small frame, barely 8 years old, held an innocence that made Sarah's heart ache even more. "Nothing, sweetheart," she replied, forcing another smile, though it felt more like a mask than a reflection of her true feelings. "Just a little disagreement. You know how grown-ups are." Jacob frowned, clearly not convinced. "Is Dad coming back?" I don't know, honey," she said softly, her voice trembling. The truth was, she was scared. Scared for their future. Scared of being left alone with the weight of the world pressing down on her. She knelt in front of him, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "But we'll be okay, I promise. We have each other." As the hours passed, Sarah felt the heaviness of the day settle around her like a thick fog. The laughter of her children filled the house, but it felt distant, like a memory she could barely grasp. The eviction notice lay crumpled on the floor, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. With Mark gone, the weight of survival rested solely on her shoulders. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the room as Sarah gathered her children around her. "All right, everyone, time to get ready for bed," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. The children groaned but complied, their little feet padding across the floor as they began to gather their toys. As she tucked Lily into bed, her heart ached with a mixture of love and sorrow. "You're so brave, sweet girl," she whispered, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." "Will Dad come back?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah hesitated, searching for the right words. "I don't know, honey, but we'll be okay, I promise." After the children were asleep, Sarah found herself staring out the window, the world outside fading into darkness. The streets were quiet, but her mind was anything but. She thought of the cabin her father had left her, the dilapidated structure that stood in a struggling neighborhood on the outskirts of town. It was a place filled with memories, some warm and comforting, others painful and fraught with tension. With nowhere else to turn, she knew she would have to return there. The thought filled her with a mixture of dread and nostalgia. She had always loved the cabin, its creaky floors and overgrown garden, but it had also been a place of family secrets and unspoken fears. She could still hear her father's laughter echoing through its halls, but also the whispers of family arguments that had left scars deeper than the walls themselves. Maybe it's time for a fresh start, she whispered to herself, trying to convince her racing heart. Maybe the cabin held more than just memories. Perhaps it held the key to rebuilding their lives. "Mom?" Jacob's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see him standing in the doorway, his little face illuminated by the soft light of the hallway. "Can you tell me a story?" Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with love for her children. "Of course, sweetheart. Come sit with me." She patted the spot next to her on the couch, and he climbed up, snuggling against her. As she began to weave a tale of adventure and bravery, she felt a flicker of hope amidst the despair. Yes, things were difficult, and yes, the future was uncertain, but they had each other, and perhaps, just perhaps, the cabin held the answers they needed to forge a new path forward. As Sarah pushed open the door to the cabin, a wave of memories washed over her, both comforting and painful. The old wooden structure creaked as if acknowledging her presence, its faded paint and chipped shutters whispering tales of her childhood. She stepped inside, the musty smell of aged wood and forgotten things enveloping her like a fog. The living room, once vibrant with laughter and life, stood in stark contrast to her current turmoil. Dust motes danced in the beams of late afternoon light, illuminating the remnants of a simpler time. "Wow, it's like a time capsule," exclaimed Lily, her 8-year-old daughter, as she darted past Sarah into the small living space. Her bright eyes sparkled with excitement, oblivious to the weight of their situation. Jacob, her 6-year-old son, followed closely, his curiosity piqued by the strange environment. Only little Ella, barely 3, clung to Sarah's leg, sensing the unease that lingered in the air. "Look at this!" Lily shouted, pulling a faded quilt from the back of a worn-out couch. The quilt was a patchwork of colors, each square a story of its own, and it reminded Sarah of the countless nights spent wrapped in its warmth, listening to her father's stories about bravery and adventure. "Can we keep it?" Lily asked, her voice filled with hope. "Of course, sweetie," Sarah replied, forcing a smile as she knelt beside her daughter. "It's still as beautiful as I remember." As the children began exploring, Sarah wandered into the kitchen, her heart heavy as she surveyed the old appliances and mismatched dishes. The space was cramped, and the flickering light bulb overhead did little to brighten the somber mood. She recalled her mother's laughter, the smell of freshly baked cookies wafting through the air, and the sound of her father's voice, always warm and reassuring. "Mom, can we go outside?" Jacob's voice broke her reverie, pulling her back to the present. "Sure, just be careful, okay?" she replied, watching as they rushed outside, their laughter ringing in the stillness of the cabin. Outside, the children ran into the overgrown yard, their giggles echoing against the trees. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, her heart aching. She had hoped for a fresh start, a safe haven for her children away from the chaos that Mark had left behind. But the cabin, with its peeling paint and creaking floors, was a reminder of everything she had lost. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard, Sarah felt a flicker of hope amongst her despair. Maybe this place could offer them a new beginning. She made her way outside, joining her children as they chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Look, Mom, I caught one," Lily exclaimed, holding her cupped hands up to show Sarah the tiny glowing creature. "That's amazing," Sarah replied, her heart swelling with pride. "Just be gentle with it, okay?" "Can we keep it?" Jacob chimed in, eyes wide with wonder. "Let's let it go, sweetheart. It's happier flying free," she said, watching as they released the firefly into the night sky. The children squealed in delight, their spirits momentarily lifting her own heavy heart. As darkness enveloped the cabin, Sarah gathered her children inside. She rummaged through the kitchen drawers to find mismatched utensils and a few pots. "How about we make some hot chocolate?" she suggested, trying to bring a sense of normalcy to their new life. "Yay!" the children cheered, their excitement contagious. They took turns stirring the mixture on the old, rusty stove while Sarah prepared cups. The warmth of the drink flowed through them, a temporary balm against the chill that settled in the air. After they sipped their hot chocolate, Sarah tucked her children into bed, reading them a story from a worn-out book she had found on the shelf. As she turned the pages, she felt the weight of her father's legacy pressing down on her. "Mom, do you think Grandpa is watching us?" Lily asked, her eyes heavy with sleep. "I like to think he is," Sarah replied softly, brushing a stray hair from her daughter's forehead. "He's always with us, in our hearts." After the children drifted off, Sarah sat in the dim light, contemplating their future. The cabin was a refuge, a place to regroup, but it was also a reminder of the past she couldn't escape. She glanced at the old clock on the wall, its ticking sound echoing in the silence. Suddenly, a noise from the attic drew her attention, a faint creak that pulled at her curiosity. Clutching a flashlight, she made her way up the narrow staircase, each step a reminder of the burdens she carried. The attic door creaked open, revealing a space filled with dust and shadows. "Dad, what secrets are you hiding?" she whispered to herself as she stepped inside. Old boxes and furniture were piled high, remnants of a life once lived. She scanned the room, her heart racing with anticipation. As she sifted through the boxes, she found old photographs, yellowed with age, capturing moments of joy and sorrow. Her father's smile was infectious, and for a moment the weight of her situation faded. But as she continued to search, she stumbled upon a large trunk in the corner, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. "What's this?" she murmured, her heart racing at the possibilities. She knelt beside it, running her fingers over the worn leather. It felt heavy with importance, as if it held answers to questions she hadn't yet thought to ask. With a deep breath, Sarah pulled at the rusty latch, but it wouldn't budge. Frustrated, she glanced around the attic. "Why can't I just know?" she sighed, feeling the weight of her worries return. "Mom?" Jacob's sleepy voice echoed from the staircase, causing her to turn. "I'm up here, honey," she called back softly. "What are you doing?" he asked, rubbing his eyes as he climbed the stairs. "Just exploring," she replied, forcing a smile. "Why don't you come help me?" Jacob's eyes brightened as he joined her, his small hands eager to assist. Together, they attempted to pry open the trunk, their laughter echoing in the dusty attic. "Do you think there are treasures inside?" Jacob asked, his face lit with excitement. "Maybe," Sarah said, her heart racing with the thrill of possibility. "Let's find out together." But as they pulled and tugged at the trunk, it remained locked, a stubborn reminder that some secrets were not meant to be uncovered easily. "Maybe it needs a key?" Jacob suggested, looking around the attic with wide eyes. "A key," Sarah mused, her mind racing back to her father's stories about hidden treasures. "Let's keep looking. It has to be around here somewhere." As they searched through the boxes, she couldn't shake the feeling that this trunk held something important, a connection to her father that might help her navigate the treacherous waters of her current reality. The attic felt alive with possibility as they continued their search, but as the minutes turned into hours, a sense of urgency began to creep in. The weight of her situation loomed large, and she could feel the shadows of her past closing in around her. "Mom, I'm tired," Jacob yawned, leaning against her leg. "Okay, let's call it a night," she replied, tousling his hair. "We'll come back to this tomorrow." As they made their way back downstairs, Sarah couldn't help but glance back at the trunk, a silent promise to return and unlock the secrets it held. She tucked Jacob into bed, kissing his forehead as he drifted off to sleep. Lying in the dark, Sarah felt the weight of her father's legacy pressing down on her. The cabin, once a place of refuge, now felt like a labyrinth of memories and secrets. She closed her eyes, hoping for clarity and strength in the days to come, knowing that her journey had only just begun. As the morning sun streamed through the grimy windows of the cabin, Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by her father's belongings. The air was thick with dust, and memories hung like shadows around her. She could still hear her children's laughter echoing from the other room as they explored their new surroundings. It was a bittersweet symphony, one that tugged at her heartstrings. With trembling hands, she reached into the trunk, pulling out a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a frayed ribbon. "Mom, look at this." Her youngest, Lily, burst into the room, holding a rusted toy truck with a beaming smile that momentarily brightened Sarah's somber mood. "That's great, sweetie," Sarah replied, forcing a smile as she carefully opened one of the letters. The cursive handwriting was familiar, echoing her father's voice, and she felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. The letters contained snippets of her father's life, tales of hardships and triumphs, love and loss. But amidst the mundane details of daily life, there were whispers of something more extraordinary. "Mom?" Lily's voice pulled Sarah back to the present. "Can we go outside and play?" "Sure, honey. Just give me a minute," Sarah replied, her eyes still scanning the letter. One sentence caught her attention. "The treasure is hidden where the sun meets the shadows." Her heart raced at the thought. Could it be true? Was there really a treasure her father had left behind? She shook her head, dismissing the idea as a fanciful notion. Her father had been a dreamer, weaving stories to entertain his children. "Mom!" Her eldest son, Jake, peeked in, his hands on his hips, eyes wide with excitement. "Can we go to the creek? I found a really cool spot." "All right, let's go." Sarah stood up, brushing the dust from her jeans, and followed them outside. The cabin's yard was a tangled mess of weeds and overgrown grass, but the children didn't seem to mind. They ran towards the sound of water gurgling nearby, their laughter ringing out like music. As she watched them play by the creek, Sarah felt a fleeting moment of peace. The world around her was chaotic, filled with the remnants of her husband's betrayal and the weight of their uncertain future. But here, in this moment, her children were free. She joined them, kneeling in the grass, her fingers trailing through the cool water as they splashed each other. "Mom, look!" Jake shouted, holding up a shiny rock. "I think it's a gem." "Wow, let me see," Sarah exclaimed, the pure joy in her son's eyes reminding her that even amidst the darkness, there was light. She took the rock, examining it closely. "It's beautiful, Jake. You have an eye for treasure." "Just like Grandpa," Lily chimed in, her eyes sparkling. Sarah's heart tugged at the mention of her father. He had always loved nature, often taking her on adventures to find hidden treasures in the woods. It was during one of those excursions that he had first told her the tale of a treasure buried deep in the earth, a secret only the family would know. The memory flickered like a candle in the dark, reigniting her earlier curiosity about the letters. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, Sarah decided to take a walk around the property. The cabin stood stoically, a remnant of her childhood, its paint peeling and its structure weathered by time. She wandered toward the back, where her father had once built a small wooden shed. It was in this yard that she would spend countless hours, playing make-believe and dreaming of adventures. "Mom!" Jake called out, breaking her reverie. "Look at this!" He was standing next to the shed, his face lit with excitement. "What did you find?" She hurried over, her heart racing with anticipation. "Just some old tools, but look!" He pointed to a partially hidden patch of earth. "It's like something's buried here." Sarah knelt down, brushing away the dirt. Her heart pounded in her chest. Could this be the spot her father had mentioned in the letters? She began to dig with her hands, her fingers clawing at the earth, each handful bringing a rush of adrenaline. There was a sense of urgency that surged within her, as if she were on the brink of discovering something monumental. "Mom, can I help?" Lily asked, eager to join the effort. "Of course, sweetheart. Just be careful," Sarah replied, her eyes still focused on the ground. As they unearthed the soil, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that danced around them. They found nothing but rocks and old roots, yet Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting to be discovered. "Sarah?" A gentle voice broke the silence, pulling her attention away from the ground. She turned to find an elderly woman approaching from the neighboring cabin, Mrs. Jenkins, the neighbor she had heard about from the kids. The woman's silver hair glinted in the fading light, and her face was lined with the kind of wisdom that only comes from a life well lived. "Hello, Mrs. Jenkins," Sarah greeted her, brushing the dirt from her hands. "We were just exploring." "I see that," Mrs. Jenkins said with a smile, her eyes twinkling. "This place has a way of bringing out the adventurer in all of us." "Yeah, my dad used to tell stories about treasures hidden around here," Sarah admitted, glancing back at her children, who were now distracted by a butterfly flitting around them. "Your father was a good man," Mrs. Jenkins said, her tone turning serious. "He had a heart of gold, always helping others, and he believed in those stories, you know, the ones about treasures and secrets." Sarah felt a rush of warmth at the mention of her father. Did he ever tell you about any of those treasures? Mrs. Jenkins chuckled softly, her eyes narrowing in thought. Oh, he had his fair share of tall tales, but there was always a hint of truth in them. I remember him talking about something hidden away, something important. Do you think it could be real? Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. Who knows? Mrs. Jenkins shrugged. But I'll tell you this community has a way of holding on to its secrets. If there's something here, it's worth finding, and if you need help, you can count on me. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. That means a lot, Sarah replied, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within her. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the cabin, Sarah felt the weight of her father's legacy settling on her shoulders. Perhaps there was more to this place than just memories. Perhaps she could uncover the truth of her father's past and in doing so, reshape her own future. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. That night, as she settled the children into bed, the shadows danced on the walls, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was stirring within the cabin. She found herself glancing at the trunk, filled with her father's letters, and wondered what other secrets lay within. As she lay in bed, the creaking wood seemed to whisper stories of the past. She closed her eyes, hoping for clarity and guidance, and just as sleep began to take her, a dream enveloped her, a vision of her father standing in the very spot she had been digging, gesturing for her to come closer. Find it, Sarah, he urged, his voice echoing through the dream. The treasure is not just gold. It's the strength within you. With those words ringing in her mind, Sarah awoke, determination coursing through her veins. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she felt ready to face it. She understood now that her father's legacy was not merely about wealth, but about resilience, love, and the courage to confront the shadows of the past. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of the cabin, casting a golden hue over the cluttered living room. Sarah Thompson stood at the kitchen sink, her hands submerged in soapy water as she washed the few dishes that remained from last night's meager dinner. The sound of her children's laughter drifted in from the backyard, where they were playing tag among the wildflowers that had sprung up despite the neglect surrounding the cabin. For the first time in days, a sense of calm washed over her. As she wiped her hands on a dish towel, Sarah's thoughts drifted back to the trunk she had found in the attic. The letters, the hints of treasure, the stories her father had spun during her childhood. They all felt like a distant echo now, a call to adventure that she could no longer ignore. She turned off the water and, taking a deep breath, made her way outside where her children were still playing. "Mama, look at us!" shouted 8-year-old Lily, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she spun in circles, her pigtails flaring out like a whirlwind. Next to her, 5-year-old Jacob chased after their younger sister, Emma, who was giggling uncontrollably as she dodged him with the agility only a 3-year-old could muster. "Hey, you two, let's take a break," Sarah called out, her voice carrying over the sound of their playful chaos. The children halted, their faces turning towards her in unison, curious and expectant. "Can we have a snack?" Jacob asked, wiping the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "First, I have something in mind that we can do together," Sarah said, her heart racing with the prospect of involving the kids in her quest. "Do you remember the trunk we found in the attic?" "Yes," Emma squealed, her eyes wide. "It had lots of old stuff in it." "Exactly," Sarah said, kneeling to their level. "I think there might be something special hidden around here, something that could help us." Lily's brow furrowed in contemplation. "Like treasure?" "Maybe," Sarah replied, her voice laced with hope. "What do you say we search the yard? There could be clues out there, something your grandpa left behind." "Yay! Treasure hunt!" Jacob shouted, instantly abandoning his desire for snacks. The siblings erupted into cheers, their enthusiasm rekindling Sarah's dwindling spirit. They ventured into the backyard, where the grass was overgrown, and the remnants of her childhood home were obscured by weeds. Sarah felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. She remembered playing here as a little girl, her father's laughter echoing in the air as he chased her through the tall grass. Now it was just her and her children, but the essence of those memories lingered, urging her forward. "Let's split up," Lily suggested, her eyes shining with determination. "I'll check over there by the old tree." "I'll look by the fence," Jacob chimed in. "Emma, you can help Mama." "Okay, let's see what we can find," Sarah encouraged, her heart swelling with pride as she watched her children rush off to their designated spots. As she knelt beside Emma, who was busily inspecting a patch of daisies, Sarah felt a sense of purpose. "You know, sweetheart, your grandpa was a very clever man," she said softly. "He always had little surprises hidden everywhere." "Like where?" Emma asked, her little hands plucking at the flowers. Well, he once told me that he hid something special under the old oak tree," Sarah mused, her gaze drifting towards the towering tree at the edge of the yard. "Maybe it's still there." "Let's go look," Emma exclaimed, her excitement infectious. As they approached the tree, Sarah's heart raced. She knelt down, brushing away the leaves and dirt at the base of the trunk. It felt as if every layer she uncovered was a piece of her past, a connection to the father she had lost long ago. "Help me clear this away, Emma," she instructed gently. "Okay, Mama," Emma replied, eagerly digging her hands into the earth. Together they worked in tandem, unearthing small stones and twigs until they hit something solid. "Wait," Sarah said, her breath hitching. "What's this?" She brushed aside the remaining dirt to reveal a small rusted box half buried in the ground. It was ornate, with intricate designs etched into the metal, but it was locked tight. "Is it treasure?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Maybe," Sarah whispered, her fingers tracing the edges of the box. "But it's locked." Disappointment washed over her, but she quickly shook it off. "We'll find a way to open it," she said, trying to mask her frustration. "Let's keep looking. There might be something nearby that can help us." As they resumed their search, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this box was important. It was a piece of her father's legacy, something he had left behind, and it felt like a tangible connection to the man she had adored. She glanced over at her children, who were now busy investigating a cluster of rocks further down the yard, and a flicker of determination ignited within her. "Look, Mama," Jacob called out, holding up a shiny object. "I found a coin! Bring it here," Sarah urged, excitement bubbling in her chest as she knelt down to inspect it. It was old, weathered, but it glimmered in the sunlight. "Do you think it's worth money?" Jacob asked, his voice full of hope. "Maybe it belonged to your grandpa," Sarah replied, her heart swelling with pride. "He always said that coins like this could lead you to something special." "Can we keep it?" Emma asked, her tiny fingers reaching out to touch the coin. "Of course we can keep it," Sarah said with a smile. "It's a reminder to keep searching." As the hours passed, the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon with hues of orange and pink. The children grew tired, their earlier excitement waning, but Sarah felt invigorated. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of a discovery that could change everything. "Okay, team," she called, gathering her children around her. "Let's take a break and think about what we found so far. We have the coin and the locked box. What could be our next step?" "Maybe we can find a key," Jacob suggested, his eyes lighting up with possibility. "Yes, a key," Emma echoed, clapping her hands. "That's a great idea," Sarah said. "Let's search the cabin. There might be something hidden inside." The three of them hurried back into the cabin, their minds buzzing with excitement. As they rummaged through the drawers and cabinets, Sarah felt a sense of urgency build within her. The thought of the locked box weighed heavily on her mind. She had to find a way to unlock it, to reveal whatever secrets lay hidden inside. As they searched, she stumbled across her father's old toolbox, tucked away in a corner of the shed. Her heart raced as she flipped it open, revealing an array of rusty tools and forgotten trinkets. Among them, her fingers brushed against something small and cold. She pulled out a tarnished key, its surface covered in grime. "Look what I found," she exclaimed, holding it up for her children to see. "Is that a magic key?" Emma asked, eyes wide with wonder. "Maybe it is," Sarah said, her heart pounding. "Let's hope it opens the box outside." With a renewed sense of purpose, they rushed back to the oak tree, the key clutched tightly in Sarah's hand. She knelt beside the box, her breath hitching with anticipation. "Here goes nothing," she whispered, sliding the key into the lock. With a click, the box sprang open, and Sarah's heart raced as she lifted the lid. Inside, she found stacks of old newspapers, faded photographs, and a few neatly folded documents. But beneath it all, something caught her eye: a bundle of cash, neatly wrapped and untouched by time. "Whoa!" Jacob exclaimed, peering over her shoulder. "Is that real money?" "Yes, it is," Sarah breathed, her heart pounding in disbelief as she carefully lifted the bundle. It felt like a lifeline, a chance at a new beginning. But questions flooded her mind. How had her father acquired this? What did it mean for her family? As she sifted through the contents of the box, the weight of her father's legacy settled upon her shoulders. This discovery could change everything, but it also meant confronting the ghosts of her past. She glanced at her children, who were now bouncing on their toes with excitement, and suddenly felt a surge of hope. "Let's take this home," she said, her voice steady. "We have so much to discuss, and I want to make sure we're all safe." As they made their way back to the cabin, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that while they had uncovered a treasure, the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. The weight of her father's legacy loomed large, and with it, the shadows of her past began to stir, hinting at a truth she was not yet ready to face. As the sun streamed through the dusty windows of the cabin, Sarah knelt on the creaking wooden floor, feeling the coolness of the boards beneath her fingers. She had spent the morning unpacking boxes and organizing the remnants of her past, her children's laughter echoing in the background as they explored every nook and cranny of their temporary home. Just as she was about to stand, her hand brushed against something unusual. Intrigued, she pressed her palm against the floorboard, and it shifted slightly under her weight. "What do you think is under there, Mommy?" asked Lily, her eldest, peering curiously over Sarah's shoulder. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. Let's find out together," Sarah replied, her heart racing with both apprehension and excitement. With a few determined tugs, she pried the board loose, revealing a small, dust-covered space. Nestled within was an old, rusted key, its surface worn and tarnished with age. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as she held it up, the sunlight catching the metallic surface. "Look, a treasure!" exclaimed Ben, her youngest, his eyes wide with wonder. "Maybe it is," Sarah mused, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this key unlock the box she had unearthed in the backyard? The thought sent a thrill of hope through her. She had been mulling over the idea of what secrets the box might hold since she had discovered it days earlier, and now, with this key in hand, the pieces seemed to be falling into place. "Come on, let's see if it fits," she urged, leading her children outside to the backyard where the old box lay partially buried in the dirt. The box was a simple metal container, but it felt heavy with potential and mystery. The children gathered around her, their faces illuminated with excitement. Sarah knelt beside the box, inserting the key into the lock. It fit perfectly, and with a gentle turn, she felt the satisfying click of the mechanism giving way. Heart pounding, she lifted the lid slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, stacks of cash greeted her, layered neatly on top of each other, along with a collection of documents that seemed to detail her father's hidden investments and properties. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. This was not just a treasure, it was a lifeline. "Mommy, is it real?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she peered into the box. I think it is," Sarah stammered, her mind racing. The realization sank in, filling her with a sense of relief she hadn't felt in months. This could mean security for her children, a way to start anew without the shadow of Mark's debts looming over them. "Can we buy our own house now?" Ben asked, bouncing on his feet, his innocence wrapping around Sarah like a warm blanket. "Maybe, buddy. Maybe we can," she said, a smile breaking through her worry. The prospect of a future where they could have stability, a place to call their own, began to seem tangible. Just as Sarah began to feel the weight of hope lifting her spirits, the shrill ring of her cell phone shattered the moment. With a sense of dread, she reached for it, her heart sinking when she saw the caller ID. It was one of Mark's creditors. "Don't answer it, Mommy," Lily urged, her small hands gripping her mother's arm tightly. But Sarah felt an unsettling obligation to pick up. "I have to, sweetie. I need to know what they want," she said, steeling herself as she swiped to answer the call, her pulse racing. "Hello?" she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "Sarah Thompson?" The voice on the other end was cold and clipped, sending a shiver down her spine. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "We need to discuss your husband's debts. He's been avoiding us, and quite frankly, that won't work anymore. You're on the hook for this too, you know." The voice continued. "What do you mean?" Don't play innocent, Sarah. The bills are piling up, and unless you come up with a plan to pay what you owe, we'll be forced to take further action. You have until the end of the week," the creditor said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. The call ended abruptly, leaving Sarah staring blankly at her phone, the weight of the world crashing down on her once again. She felt the energy drain from her body, replaced by a cold wave of fear. "Mommy!" Ben's small voice broke through her thoughts, his innocent eyes searching her face. "What did they say?" They want money," Sarah replied, her throat tightening as she fought to keep the tremor out of her voice. "They're saying we owe more than I thought." "Are we going to lose the cabin?" Lily asked, her voice small and shaky. No, sweetheart. We're going to figure this out," Sarah assured them, though she felt her resolve beginning to crumble. The discovery of the hidden fortune had ignited a flicker of hope, but the call from the creditor extinguished it just as quickly. "Let's go inside. I need to think," Sarah said, her mind racing with the implications of what lay ahead. She ushered the children back into the cabin, their chatter fading as they sensed the heaviness in the air. Once inside, Sarah sank onto the worn couch, her fingers trembling as she clutched the documents she'd found in the box. The investment papers offered glimpses into her father's life, but now they felt like a burden rather than a blessing. They were a reminder of the weight she had to bear alone. "Mommy, can we play a game?" Ben asked, his small voice a beacon of innocence in the dim room. "Maybe later, honey," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "I just need a moment, okay?" "Okay," he replied, though his brows furrowed in concern. As they settled into a quiet lull, Sarah flipped through the papers again, hoping to find a solution, a way out of the mess that Mark's actions had created. Her father had worked hard to build something, investing in properties that could potentially provide her with some financial stability. But could she manage it all alone? "What are you thinking about, Mommy?" Lily asked, her eyes studying her mother's face. "I'm thinking about how to make sure we're safe," Sarah said softly. "I want us to have a good life here, but I need to figure out how." "Can we help?" Ben chimed in, his enthusiasm a stark contrast to Sarah's turmoil. "Of course you can help. You can always help," she said, her heart swelling with love for her children. They were her reason to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward despite the darkness that threatened to engulf her. As the evening light dimmed outside, Sarah felt the weight of her father's legacy pressing down on her. It was both a gift and a burden, but now more than ever, she needed to take control of her destiny. She needed to gather her strength and face the challenges ahead. "All right, kids," she said, her voice steadier now. "Let's make a plan. We're going to figure this out together." The children brightened, and even amidst the uncertainty, Sarah felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. They would find a way to navigate this treacherous path, to turn the hidden fortune into a foundation for their future. But lurking in the shadows were the threats from Mark's past, and the battle was far from over. Together they huddled around the box, a symbol of both their struggles and their potential. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the fight ahead, determined to protect her family and uncover the truth that lay buried within both her father's legacy and her own heart. In the dim light of the cabin, Sarah Thompson sat at the small dining table, the weight of her father's legacy pressing heavily on her shoulders. The stacks of cash and documents she had discovered in the rusted box were spread out before her, like a map to an uncertain future. She had always known her father to be a man of quiet strength, but the depths of his hidden life were now being revealed to her in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The thought of her children relying on her made her heart race, but with that came the realization of the responsibility she now bore. The soft laughter of her children, playing in the adjacent room, pulled her momentarily from her thoughts. It was a reminder that, despite the chaos that had unfolded in her life, they were still innocent and full of hope. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "What will I do with all of this?" she murmured to herself, tracing her fingers over the documents. Some detailed investments that her father had made, others hinted at properties scattered throughout the state. It was a legacy that could offer them a new beginning, but it also came with questions and the potential for danger. Just then, the sudden creak of the cabin door interrupted her reverie. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat as she turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. Mark. He looked disheveled, his eyes wide with a mix of hope and desperation. "Sarah, please," he pleaded, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I know I messed up. I've changed. I want to come home. I want us to be a family again." She felt a rush of emotions, anger, confusion, and a flicker of the love she once had for him. The man who had left her with nothing but debts and despair now stood before her, asking for forgiveness. "You can't just waltz back into our lives, Mark," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. You left us. You left me to fend for myself. I know. I was stupid, Sarah. I let my pride get the best of me, but I've been thinking. I can fix this. I can be a better husband, a better father. He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. Just give me a chance. Sarah's mind raced. She could hear her children's laughter still echoing in the background, a stark contrast to the tension building between them. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, a rustling sound from outside caught her attention. It was faint, but she could have sworn she saw a shadow flicker past the window. Wait, she said, holding up a hand to silence him. Do you hear that? Mark paused, his expression shifting from hopeful to wary. Hear what? Someone's out there. Sarah moved to the window, peering into the gathering dusk. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, but she could sense a presence. Someone watching. Her heart pounded as her mind raced back to her childhood, to the stories of her father warning her about the dangers lurking in the shadows of their neighborhood. Sarah? Mark's voice was a whisper, laced with concern. What's going on? I don't know, I feel like we're not alone. She turned back to him, her brow furrowed. This isn't just about us anymore. There are things I need to figure out. As if on cue, the figure stepped into view, illuminated by the fading light. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as recognition washed over her. It was James, her father's estranged brother, an enigmatic man who had always been a source of whispers and speculation in the family. He had been a ghost in her childhood, appearing only in the corners of her memory, often accompanied by tales of betrayal and lost fortunes. What is he doing here? Mark's voice was low, almost a growl. You don't need him, Sarah. She shook her head, torn between the past and the present. James knows things about our family, about my father's hidden life. He might have answers. Or he could bring more trouble, Mark countered, crossing his arms defensively. You think he came here to help us? Sarah's gaze remained fixed on James, who stood just outside the cabin, his expression unreadable. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I need to find out. With a deep breath, Sarah opened the door, stepping out into the cool evening air. The moment she did, James raised a hand in greeting, his face breaking into a cautious smile that did little to ease her apprehension. Sarah, he said, his voice gravelly yet warm, it's been a long time. Too long, she replied, wary but curious. What are you doing here, James? I heard about your situation. I came to see if you needed help. He glanced past her to where Mark stood in the doorway, his posture tense. I see you've got company. This is my husband, Sarah said, trying to keep her tone neutral. He wants to come back into our lives. James's gaze shifted to Mark, assessing him with a wary eye. Is that so? You've made quite the mess, haven't you? Mark stepped forward, his voice rising defensively. You don't know what you're talking about. This is between me and my family. Family? James scoffed, taking a step closer. You abandoned them. You think you can just walk back in after leaving them to deal with your mistakes? Enough, Sarah interjected, feeling the tension escalate. This isn't helping. I need both of you to listen to me. Mark crossed his arms, his expression a mix of anger and hurt. What do you want, Sarah? To hear him say he's got all the answers? He's just as much a stranger to you as I am. Maybe, she conceded, but he might know something about my father's legacy. Something that could help us. James looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. Your father left more than just the cash you found. There are connections, and if you're serious about protecting your family, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Mark's expression shifted from anger to confusion. What does that mean? It means, James said, his voice firm, that your father had enemies, people who may come looking for what he left behind. You need to be prepared for that. Sarah felt her heart drop. The weight of her father's hidden life was becoming clearer, but so too were the shadows that loomed over their future. What do you suggest? She asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. I can help you uncover the truth, but first, you need to decide who you trust, James replied, his gaze shifting between Sarah and Mark. Because trust will be your greatest asset from here on out. As the three of them stood in the dim light of the cabin, a heavy silence fell, each of them grappling with the tangled web of loyalty, love, and betrayal. Sarah felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She was at a crossroads, unsure of whom to trust and what the future held. The shadows of her past were closing in, but within her, a flicker of determination ignited. She would fight for her family and uncover the truth, no matter the cost.